Hi everyone, in this tutorial we're gonna dive into Substance and we're gonna learn how to create two textures, actually trail textures, so you can use them in your fire projectile. So in here you can see I've got this one and I've got that one as well. We're gonna create one graph and we're gonna extract two of those textures from a single graph and use them in our projectile. So I hope you're gonna enjoy this one. I'm gonna start with parallel noise so I can extract the trail from it using the cross section. I'm gonna use a gradient mirrored option and scale down my parallel noise so I could get a nice looking trail, something like this. Play with this order as well so I can get nice variation. I'm gonna use a histogram scan to create a outline of it, and also for me to control how thick I want my trail to be. I'm gonna go with something like this. And next I'm gonna use a tile sampler so I can create some circular shapes and extract them from my trail. But I'm gonna use my trail as a mask here. I'm gonna go for discs. I'm gonna go maybe for 8x8. Put some random position here, scroll down where my mask is and invert it. So now if I go up and start increasing my scale, as you can see, you can use this as a trail even, but I'm gonna try to extract or subtract those shapes from my histogram scan. So as you can see, you don't even have to do that. You can actually use this as your trail. However, if you're having some artifacts at the top, for example, or some holes, you can just use this instead. Okay, so next I'm gonna use bevel on the minus values so I could get nice gradients from that. And next maybe I'm gonna try to warp this one. So I'm gonna use a warp with a multi-directional warp grayscale, and I usually use parallel noise, but I'm gonna try something else. I'm gonna try that using cells. I want to invert that so I could get like a Voronoi texture that we use for erosions in the game engine, and I'm just gonna blur that one maybe with the default value, and that's gonna be my intensity input for my warp. I'm gonna increase it maybe to 50 or even more, and I'm gonna play with the settings. I'm gonna try this first. I'm gonna play maybe with the different options, but I think average should work for us. I'm just gonna increase the scale for cells slightly because not much happening here. See if I can increase or actually decrease the intensity of that blur, and we're finally getting somewhere with this. I'm gonna increase now this to even more, maybe 150. Okay, I'm gonna copy that bevel that we did before, go with this here, and maybe increase the distance of it on the minus values even more. I'm gonna use exactly the same multi-directional warp grayscale. Oops. And with the same settings, but much lower intensity, maybe around 90. Next, I'm gonna use a histogram scan. Because I only want the center of it. Something like this, and I'm gonna blend those two together. And I think I want this to be our main trail, and that one's going to be our background trail. Gonna try add, or maybe max instead. And I think max works better. Yep, so I'm just gonna keep it like this. Wanna create some blur to it as well. Kind of like a glowing background. And I'm just gonna blend those two together now. So I want my glow or blur to be at the top. It's gonna be max. And now I can control how much of that glow I actually want in that trail. Okay, let's see if we can maybe distort it even further. So I'm gonna get a warp. I'm gonna use multi-directional warp grayscale. And for this, I'm gonna use Perlin noise. However, I'm gonna blur it a lot more. Scale it down. And for the blur, I'm just gonna go with 10. Let's see if that's gonna help a little bit. Oops. Okay, so 0. And I think I have to put high value, like maybe 200. 200 might be actually too much, so maybe let's put 100. Okay, maybe 90. And I'm gonna tweak a couple settings. I'm gonna try min with 4 directions. Let's see if rotation is gonna give us something. Okay, maybe I'm gonna go with something like this. And then I'm gonna try to see if I can blend them together. I kind of like this one, so that's gonna be my main trail, and that one's gonna be as an additional trail. Somewhere maybe 0.7. At the moment, I'm just looking at it. I'm trying to come up with some interesting shapes that could reflect the fire element. So this is more like an exploration rather than I know how the last node's gonna look like. I'm just exploring various methods to see if I'm going in the right direction. So if we go back to the beginning where we had maybe our first multi-directional warp grayscale, you can see we clearly see some shapes. It seems like it's generated, but with this one we got a lot more various swirls here, and I think it just blends nicely. So let's continue with this. Okay, so I've got this, we just blend it together. I think I want to have another multi-directional warp grayscale. So let's go for it, and let's just test if we can use maybe simple Perlin noise with the low scale. I'm actually gonna increase it slightly here. And for the settings, I'm actually gonna use average and fairly default settings, but I'm gonna increase this to up to 100. So as you can see, we are getting a little bit more various shapes here, but I think it's a little bit too much. I'm gonna just continue with this. I'm gonna use directional blur with the default settings, and finally I'm just gonna use blur with the default settings. You can see we're getting a slightly different shape than what we had, and I'm gonna blend it back together to our original one here with the max settings. So I'm just layering various effects on top of each other, trying to create a bit more glowing shapes on the outside now. Okay, and again, let's try this warp again, a multi-directional one. I'm gonna go with cells this time, invert it again so we can get our Voronoi texture. Take the scale down slightly, maybe 7. Invert, and I'm just gonna use blur. It's gonna be average. I'm gonna maybe go with a higher value. Let's try 200. I'm gonna change this one, but it doesn't give us much, so I'm just gonna keep it default. Yep. And let's see if we can blend it back in. Let's see if this is gonna give us anything as an additional detail to that one. So again, a lot of layering here, I think. Just gonna put the opacity fairly low, maybe 0.5. So we've got our main glow around center, and then on the outside we're getting various different shapes. Okay, so finally let's just apply final glow to it, or blur. So in here, just gonna get the blur grayscale, gonna put higher value, maybe 30. I blend it back in for the additional glow. I'm gonna use max settings, and for the glow, I'm gonna go 0.3 maybe, just a little bit there. I'm gonna use transformation tool just to offset it to see how it might look. I think it looks okay. Just gonna keep it there, and I'm gonna create my gradient map just to preview how it might look with the various colors. So in here, gradient editor, I'm gonna pick yellow color, then orange, and then at the end it's just gonna be red. I think that one is a little bit too intense. I'm gonna get rid of that one. Okay, I think we could benefit slightly from having a bit more intense white values. So let's see if we can bring them back a little bit. I'm gonna head here, play with that bevel. As you can see, we are getting a slight brighter values that are actually poking through those swirly shapes. I'm gonna play with that bevel as well, just to see if we can bring even more, but I think it might be a little bit too much here. See if we can play with that warp again. I think I'm just gonna leave it as it was and play with the bevel instead. Just reduce it and smooth it as well. Okay, so that will be our main fire trail. And for the background one, I'm just gonna use our blur that we've got here, and I'm gonna run it through warp grayscale here. I'm gonna get exactly the same cells to distort it, and in here I'm gonna put much higher value, about 200 maybe. Leave the default settings here, and that's gonna be my background trail, a bit more like a smoky trail. I'm gonna use for my fire projectile. Let's see if maybe instead of this simple blur we can apply actually that one. I think it's gonna give us a bit more sharper shapes here. Okay, I think I'm gonna put a bit more blur here, but I need to be cautious because it's gonna alter both of my warp grayscales. So that one still looks okay, and that one feels a bit more smoky. So I'm just gonna keep it as it is, and I'm gonna use that one as my smoke trail for the projectile. All right, so that's it. I hope you enjoyed this one. Just a last note, I'm gonna add glow to see if that's gonna actually bring those nice values here for the orange. It actually is gonna bring a bit more glow to the whole texture. So as you can see, I think, you know, just by looking at this glow, I think it could work as a fire trail. It's got some nice swirly shapes here, especially here, quite like those. And that one's just going to be very simple smoke trail that we're going to use as a background trail behind our fire trail. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this one. I hope you can experiment a little bit with multi-directional warp grayscale as I did, because to be honest, there's many variations and many values we used for that node. All right, thank you so much.